All right, everyone, welcome back to TalkTickers.
Back for more earnings deep dives.
Well, actually, not quite today.
Oh, right.
We're taking a bit of a detour this time around, kind of a palate cleanser.
A palate cleanser?
Yeah, before we jump back into the craziness of earnings season.
I like it.
So, instead of dissecting the latest numbers and CEO whispers, we're going to be unpacking some serious business wisdom.
Wisdom from a true titan of industry.
Exactly. We're diving into the letters of Jeff Bezos, the letters he wrote to Amazon shareholders over the years.
Oh, the Bezos letters, a legendary source of insights.
You've got a whole stack of them here, spanning from 1997 all the way to his last one as CEO in 2021.
Wow. Quite a journey to trace.
Now, you might be thinking, hold on, I'm not an Amazon investor. Why should I care?
Yeah, not everyone's a Wall Street junkie.
True, but trust me, these letters are not just for finance nerds.
Oh, they go way beyond that.
They're like a masterclass in long-term thinking, innovation, building a company that truly dominates its market.
Dominate is an understatement.
And Amazon basically invented online shopping as we know it.
Well, they certainly perfected it.
Okay, so let's dive in.
Where do we even begin?
Let's start with the famous day one philosophy.
Ah, yes, the day one mantra.
Bezos hammers on this constantly in his letters. It's like the bedrock of Amazon's culture.
It's almost a religion at Amazon.
But what does it actually mean, beyond just sounding cool?
Right. It's more than just a catchy phrase.
Like, what's the practical application of this day one thinking?
Well, think back to 1997 when Amazon was just a scrappy online bookstore.
The internet was still the Wild West back then.
Exactly. And that day one mentality was all about maintaining that startup hustle, that hunger to experiment and disrupt.
Even as you grow into a behemoth like Amazon.
It's about resisting corporate complacency, not getting bogged down in bureaucracy.
You're constantly pushing forward, staying agile.
Because Bezos believed that day two is stasis.
Stasis?
Yeah, followed by irrelevance, followed by agonizing decline, followed by death.
Whoa, that escalated quickly.
Well, that's Bezos for you. No sugarcoating.
He was serious about this day one thing.
He drilled it into the company's DNA.
We talk a lot about long-term thinking here on TalkTickers, but Bezos really walked the walk.
He wasn't chasing those quarterly earnings. He was playing the long game.
And you can see that crystal clear in these letters.
Absolutely, from the very beginning.
That first letter from 1997, right in the middle of the dot-com bubble.
Everyone was going crazy for internet stocks.
And yet Bezos is talking about building an enduring franchise.
Making decisions based on long-term market leadership.
It's like he had a roadmap from day one.
A roadmap to world domination, basically.
And he stuck to it, even when Wall Street was screaming for short-term gains.
He was building something that would last.
Which brings us to another key insight from these letters. The evolution of Amazon's business model.
Ah, yes, the ever-expanding empire.
They started with books, then moved into music, video.
Eventually becoming the everything store we know today.
But it wasn't just random expansion, right?
There was a method to the madness.
It all ties back to his flywheel concept.
Ah, the famous flywheel.
He describes this in detail in his 2001 letter.
It's essentially this idea that low prices, great customer experience, and growth.
All feeding into each other.
Creating this unstoppable cycle.
It's like a snowball effect.
Yeah, one thing leads to another, and you've got this avalanche of success.
And this flywheel mentality was crucial to understanding how Amazon became so dominant.
It wasn't just about selling stuff online.
It was about creating this ecosystem.
Where everything worked together to benefit the customer.
Which ultimately, of course, benefited Amazon.
A win-win situation,
Yeah.
at least for Amazon.
Now, one thing that really struck me as we were prepping for this deep dive was how much Bezos talks about failure.
Failure from the guy who built one of the most successful companies ever.
Right, you wouldn't expect that.
But he actually embraced failure as a necessary part of innovation.
You got to break a few eggs to make an omelet, right?
Something like that.
He even said, and I'm quoting here, if you know in advance that it's going to work, it's not an experiment.
Pretty radical thinking.
So it's about taking risks, knowing that some things will fail.
But being okay with that because the successes will outweigh the losses.
Like, think about the Fire Phone.
Oh yeah, that was a disaster.
A massive flop.
But the lessons learned from that debacle directly fueled the development of Echo and Alexa.
Which turned out to be massive hits.
So it's like turning lemons into lemonade on a multi-billion-dollar scale.
Well, how does this tie back to the day one mentality?
Well, if you're stuck in that day two thinking, you become risk-averse, afraid to fail.
And that stifles innovation.
Maintaining that day one energy means being willing to put it all on the line, even if it means bombing sometimes.
That's a powerful lesson, not just for businesses, but for anyone who's trying to achieve something big.
Don't let the fear of failure hold you back.
And Bezos had a very specific way of looking at failure. He talked about planting seeds.
Seeds of innovation.
Some of those seeds would grow into giant trees,
Others would wither and die.
but you have to keep planting, keep experimenting if you want to see those big wins.
It's a numbers game.
All right, so we've got day one, long-term thinking, the flywheel, embracing failure. It's like we're building a Bezos playbook here.
The secrets to success, according to Bezos.
But there's one more ingredient we have to add. Customer obsession.
Ah, yes, the legendary customer obsession.
This is more than just good customer service. It's a deep, almost fanatical dedication.
To understanding and serving your customers,
Better than anyone else.
make them feel like royalty.
And this comes through loud and clear in every single letter.
It's a recurring theme.
Bezos constantly hammering on the importance of putting the customer first.
Even if it means sacrificing short-term profits.
He even said, and I'm quoting again, "We're not competitor obsessed, we're customer obsessed.
Bold statement.
We start with what the customer needs and we work backwards."
It's like he flipped the script on traditional business thinking.
Instead of focusing on beating the competition, he's focused on making the customer so happy that the competition becomes irrelevant.
Wow, that's a high bar.
And this plays out in everything Amazon does.
From their obsession with fast shipping.
To their constant innovations in delivery and customer service.
It's all about making the customer's life easier and more convenient.
So let's zoom in on this customer obsession a bit more.
Let's get specific.
What are some examples from the letters where Bezos really demonstrates this in action?
Well, take the 2003 letter, for instance.
2003, okay.
He dives deep into their pricing strategy.
He doesn't just say, "We offer low prices."
He actually compares Amazon's prices on 100 best-selling books to those in a physical bookstore.
I remember that. He talks about how they physically went to those stores,
Spent hours finding all the book.
calculated the total cost.
It's almost comical, this obsessive level of detail.
Exactly. But it's more than just a stunt,
It shows you how deeply they were committed to offering the lowest prices.
even if it meant lower short-term margins.
They were willing to take a hit on profits to win over the customer.
Long-term vision right there.
And that's just one example. In the 2011 letter, he talks about proactively delighting customers.
Even if it means slightly reduced sales in the short term.
That's a pretty radical concept.
Most companies would be terrified of doing anything that might hurt sales, even for a little bit.
But Bezos was playing the long game,
He understood that building trust and loyalty with customers was more valuable.
then squeezing out every last penny in the short term.
And it's a strategy that clearly paid off.
Big time.
Amazon is now known for its incredible customer service.
People are willing to pay a premium for that peace of mind and convenience.
It all stems from that customer obsession that Bezos instilled in the company's DNA.
It's part of their core values.
All right, so we've covered day one, long-term thinking, the flywheel, embracing failure, and customer obsession.
We're starting to see the blueprint for Amazon's success.
The underlying principles that drove their incredible growth.
And these principles are more than just theoretical concepts,
They manifest in very specific initiatives and innovations.
which we'll dive into in the next part of our deep dive.
So stay tuned, folks. We're just getting started.
The Bezos saga continues.
All right, so we've laid out some of Bezos's core philosophies. It's like he's giving us a peek behind the curtain of how Amazon operates. But let's get concrete. How did these ideas actually play out in the real world? Because Amazon didn't become a trillion-dollar company just by thinking long-term.
Right, you're absolutely right. Ideas are great, but execution is everything. And that's where things get really interesting when you look at these letters. You start to see how those principles manifested in specific decisions and initiatives that completely reshaped the retail landscape.
So where do we even begin? Amazon has its fingers in so many pies these days, it's hard to know where to focus.
Well, we can't talk about Amazon's success without diving into the behemoth that is Amazon Prime. Think back to 2005 when it launched. All you can eat 2-day shipping for a flat annual fee. It sounded like a crazy gamble at the time.
I remember thinking, who's going to pay for shipping up front? It seemed counterintuitive, but Bezos was playing 4D chess while everyone else was stuck in checkers.
Exactly. And even within Amazon, there was a lot of pushback. But Bezos was convinced it would create this incredible flywheel effect.
Meaning Prime members would be more likely to shop on Amazon, leading to more sales, which would allow them to further invest in making Prime even better, attracting even more members.
You got it. And Bezos lays out this thinking explicitly in his 2005 letter, arguing that Prime would create a virtuous cycle that would benefit both customers and the company.
And boy, was he right. Prime has become this massive revenue generator for Amazon
Yeah.
and a key driver of customer loyalty. I mean, who doesn't love free, fast shipping?
Right. It's become so ubiquitous that it's almost hard to remember a time before Prime. But it's a prime example of how Bezos was willing to bet big on a seemingly risky idea that ultimately paid off massively.
And Prime has evolved so much over the years. It's gone way beyond just free shipping. Now you've got Prime Video, Prime Music, Prime Reading, even grocery delivery with Amazon Fresh.
And that's another key takeaway here. Amazon doesn't just rest on its laurels. They're constantly iterating, expanding, and finding new ways to add value for Prime members.
It's like they're building this walled garden of convenience that's hard to escape once you're inside.
Precisely. And that's part of their genius. They understand that convenience is king, and they're constantly finding new ways to make it even more convenient to shop and consume content within the Amazon ecosystem.
Okay, so Prime is this massive success story fueled by that customer obsession and long-term thinking. But Amazon's innovation didn't stop there. They made another huge bet that most people thought was nuts. Amazon Web Services, AWS.
Ah, yes, AWS. This is where things get really interesting from a technology perspective. Because back in the early 2000s, most companies were building their own data centers, managing their own servers. It was a huge expense and headache.
Yeah, like the Wild West of IT infrastructure.
Exactly. And Amazon, as they were scaling up their own operations, realized they had built this incredible expertise in managing massive amounts of data and computing power.
So they thought, hey, why not sell this expertise to other companies?
Precisely. And that's how AWS was born. In his 2006 letter, Bezos describes it as this new business focused on serving software developers and helping them build and scale their applications more easily and affordably.
It was a bold move. Essentially, they were taking their internal infrastructure and turning it into a product.
And at the time, nobody really understood what they were doing. Wall Street analysts were scratching their heads, competitors were laughing, but Bezos was convinced it would be huge.
And once again, he was right. AWS has become this massive cash cow for Amazon, powering a huge chunk of the internet.
It's the backbone of countless startups, enterprises, even government agencies, and it all stems from that same day one mentality, being willing to experiment, to take risks, and to bet on the future.
And speaking of risky bets, let's talk about Amazon Marketplace. This is where they opened up their platform to third-party sellers, essentially inviting competition onto their own site.
Yeah, it seems counterintuitive, right? Why would you let other companies sell their products alongside yours? But Bezos, in his typical long-term thinking fashion, saw the bigger picture.
He realized that by allowing third-party sellers, they could dramatically expand their selection, offer even lower prices, and ultimately create a better experience for customers.
You nailed it. And it worked brilliantly. Marketplace exploded in popularity, giving customers access to millions of products from all over the world.
And it also created a whole new revenue stream for Amazon. They take a cut of each sale made through Marketplace, and it's become a significant portion of their profits.
It's another example of that flywheel effect in action. More sellers attract more customers, who are then drawn to the wider selection and lower prices, which in turn attracts even more sellers.
It's like this self-reinforcing cycle of growth and innovation, all driven by that customer-centric approach.
Exactly. And it's this ability to constantly adapt and evolve that has allowed Amazon to stay ahead of the curve and become the dominant force they are today.
So we've got Prime, AWS, and Marketplace. Three pillars of Amazon's success that all emerge from Bezos' unique approach to building a business. And it's amazing to see how these initiatives, which seemed radical and risky at the time, have transformed the way we shop, the way businesses operate, and even the way we think about technology. But there's one more piece of the puzzle we need to talk about, and that's Bezos' emphasis on building a high-standards culture. So we've talked about Prime, AWS Marketplace, all these massive innovations. But what's the secret sauce that ties it all together?
I think it's this idea Bezos calls a high standards culture. He talks about it extensively, especially in his later letters.
Yeah, it's more than just setting the bar high.
It's about instilling this deep-seated belief in doing things exceptionally well.
Like excellence is the norm.
And Bezos argues that high standards are teachable
You can cultivate them.
in any area.
He uses this really cool analogy in his 2017 letter.
Oh, yeah, I remember this one.
Learning to do a perfect handstand.
The handstand analogy.
He explains that achieving high standards requires two things.
Okay, lay it on me.
First, you have to recognize what good looks like in a particular area.
So you need a clear vision of excellence.
And second, you need realistic expectations about the effort and time it takes to reach that level.
It's not going to happen overnight.
Right, you don't just magically become a handstand pro overnight.
It takes practice, dedication.
Probably a few bumps and bruises along the way.
Exactly. And this applies to everything.
From writing a clear memo
To launching a new product line.
it's about setting the bar high and then putting in the work to meet those expectations.
No shortcuts.
But how do you actually build that culture of high standards?
Yeah.
It's easy to say we want to be the best, but how do you make it happen?
On a company-wide scale.
Yeah, that's a challenge.
Well, Bezos outlines a few key strategies in his letters.
Okay, I'm all ears.
One is to hire people who already have high standards in their respective domains.
So surround yourself with A players.
Right, people who are already striving for excellence.
But it's not just about hiring the right people.
It's about creating an environment where those high standards can flourish.
So it's like setting the tone from the top.
Exactly. Leaders need to model those high standards themselves.
In everything they do.
Bezos was known for his meticulous attention to detail
His relentless focus on customer experience.
and his willingness to challenge the status quo.
It's like that old saying, actions speak louder than words.
Absolutely. And another key aspect is providing clear and consistent feedback.
Feedback is crucial,
Bezos was a big believer in giving people direct, honest feedback
both positive and negative.
to help them understand what good looks like and how they can improve.
So it's not about sugarcoating things, it's about being upfront.
Honest, so people can learn and grow.
And it's also important to celebrate successes.
Recognize and reward people.
People who are consistently achieving those high standards,
Create that positive reinforcement loop.
where people are motivated to do their best work.
Exactly. And all of this contributes to building a culture where high standards become ingrained in the DNA of the company.
It's not just a slogan, it's a way of life.
You breathe it, you live it.
And you can see this reflected in everything Amazon does.
From their obsession with fast shipping,
To their relentless pursuit of innovation.
there's a clear commitment to doing things exceptionally well.
And that's what sets them apart from so many other companies.
It's not just about making money,
It's about building something great, something that lasts.
leaving a legacy.
So we've covered a lot of ground here today, from dissecting earnings calls to dissecting Bezos's letters. It's been a fascinating journey.
A deep dive into the mind of a visionary.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what are some key takeaways for our listeners?
What can they learn from Bezos and apply to their own lives and careers?
Even if they're not running a massive company like Amazon.
Well, I think the most important lesson is to think long-term.
Don't get caught up chasing those short-term gains.
Focus on building something that will last.
And don't be afraid to experiment, to take risks, to embrace failure as a learning opportunity.
It's all part of the process.
And obsess over your customers. Truly understand their needs and find ways to delight them, even if it means sacrificing those short-term profits.
Put the customer at the center of everything you do.
And build a culture of high standards. Surround yourself with talented people, set that bar high, and give people the tools and freedom to do their best work.
Create an environment where excellence thrives.
Well said. And if you're interested in diving deeper into Bezos's thinking, I highly recommend checking out his shareholder letters.
We'll include a link to them in the show notes.
They're a treasure trove of wisdom and insight, and they offer a fascinating glimpse into the mind of a true visionary.
A must-read for anyone in business.
All right, folks, that's it for our deep dive into Jeff Bezos's shareholder letters.
We hope you found it insightful.
And maybe even a little bit inspiring.
It's been a pleasure exploring these letters with you.
And don't worry, we'll be back to our regularly scheduled programming next week, breaking down the latest earnings calls and deciphering those CEO whispers.
Back to the numbers game.
Until then, keep learning, keep innovating, and keep that day one mentality alive.
Stay hungry, stay foolish.
See you next time.